So anyone have a question? We have like 6 minutes. Anything someone wants to ask about the material of the course or the Dharma in general? Yeah, Christine, you have a question.
So they talk about restraint from, I want to know, what is the difference between what they call restraint from misconduct, which is the support for embarrassment and shame, and non-engagement in misconduct, which is non-attachment. What is the difference between those two, engaging and restraint?
Non-engagement and restraint. Right?
Non-engagement and restraint, right.
Yeah. And I'll just say hello to Alex, who's joining us for a little bit this morning. I met him yesterday in Weaverville. We had a nice lunch together. So he's going to have to leave early, but he's here. So the notes that CG had written here, what did she say? She has a footnote, right? One might expect to have read acting as a support for non-engagement in misconduct. But I think this is referring to all of them. At one point it says acting as a, what does it say? As acting as a support for non-engagement. In another place it says acting to restrain. So it means the same thing. The sense of restraint is restraining from negative action kind of implies more that those things are antidotes, which they are, the three roots of virtue that we're talking about. I call them the three roots of virtue. Usually we say the three roots of non-virtue are what? Anyone know? Bob, do you know three roots of non-virtue?
You mean ignorance, hatred, and attachment.
Yeah. Usually when we talk about the three root delusions, they're anger, attachment, and ignorance. Whereas here, there's a different word for ignorance. It's a little more expansive, moha in Sanskrit, or timuk. And also, instead of anger, there's the word hatred. I'll mention a little bit about the difference between the two when the rest of the people come. So Alex, you're in good stead here. You see Christine on the right there. She has the merit field behind her. I have a big merit field, and you've got a more, was that Lama Tsongkhapa, or was that behind you?
Yeah, Lama Tsongkhapa.
Lama Tsongkhapa, okay. So, excellent. Anyone else have a quick question before we start? Yeah, Stephen.
It's really more kind of an, excuse me, Venerable George, it's more kind of an observation. Yeah. When we talk about aspiring faith or wishing faith, I get the sense that it's also a certain faith in oneself, that through appropriate effort, one is actually going to be able to accomplish these realizations or perfections. And I find it kind of interesting because, when we talk about shamatha, there's the three types of lazinesses. And the third is like the laziness of not believing in yourself, which to me seems to be like the counterpoint of aspiring faith. And then I think it also appears later in, I have to remember which of the virtuous mental factors, but I think it's, in effort as well. There's that element of self-confidence.
Yeah. So in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, when we talk about effort, or maybe in English, maybe this another way to translate it is joyous effort or enthusiastic perseverance. Some people just translate zeal. There are two different kinds of hindrances in terms of one's own abilities. One is thinking, oh, if I have to remain for hundreds of eons to liberate one being, I can't do that. This, let's say the sense of frustration that seems so much. And another is the one of thinking of oneself as not having the qualities. And so, yeah, that is involved. The way that one overcomes that, the instructions, the oral instructions in the Prajnaparamita for the Bodhisattvas to overcome those types of laziness is to meditate on emptiness. So, understanding that first of all, the things are dependent arisings and they're empty of inherent existence. There's no inherently existent impediments. And as a result of that, once you have some insight into that, you can overcome that sense of inability that you have, you have the Buddha nature and so forth. So we touch on that in our meditation at the beginning of the classes. So good morning, Rowena and Alda. Good morning. So we're going to begin now with a little meditation motivation. We have a new guest here. Alex is with us, who's also a computer programmer. I think, Stephen, you're a computer programmer, aren't you?
Oh, I used to be, but I'm way too old now.
You're way too old. Leave it to the young guys like Alex. Okay, sit comfortably with your spine erect. Relax your body. Relax your mind. And recognizing your inhalation, keep your mindfulness upon it, on the recognizing when you're breathing in, when you're breathing out, to the exclusion of everything else. Try to glimpse that point in the two cycles when the direction of the breathing changes, just where you start to exhale, and then on the inhalation, just when you begin to inhale. As your breath becomes more rhythmic and light, that is to say soft, not hard, harsh, bring your attention away from watching the respiration to your mental consciousness. First of all, just noticing the contents, thoughts, what you're thinking, memories, images, plans, emotional states, if there's a little bit of attachment or resentment. See them as clouds in the otherwise clear space-like state of your mind. Recognizing that the thoughts and images, even inner conversation, can emerge and absorb back into that clear sense of the mind. Recognize it as the conventional clear light nature, the lack of the mental consciousness's lack of forming any obstacle to thoughts. Even when thoughts are present, you can dismiss them quickly by asking yourself to observe the nature of the mind that's perceiving those thoughts, sort of as though turning your back on someone who's right in your face, seeing the clear light nature of the mind within which they're arising. Let go of your sense of body. That's as you're bringing your attention more to the mental consciousness, you can begin to absorb a little bit the sense consciousness away from the location of the faculties. Let go of your sense of I, the observer. That act is not a meditation on emptiness, just recognizing that the way that the self appears to the mind is just a mental image. If you don't pay attention to it for long enough, it begins to subside. Still there, but not manifesting as strongly. Then recognizing the import of this observation, this conventional clear light nature of the mind, which is also identical to the developmental Buddha nature. The fact that we can develop within the mind all of those qualities that we might admire, but have up till now felt we couldn't, we didn't have the stuff to do it. We didn't have the right stuff. We do have the right stuff. We have this conventional clear light nature of the mind. Because all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, they are dependent arisings. So states of mind which are impermanent all have causes and effects. If we create the right causes, we can develop bodhicitta, renunciation, wisdom. We can develop patience, forgiveness, all the virtuous qualities of the mind. And right now, the reason that we are able to recognize that is because we have a life of leisure and endowment, also caused by causes, karmic causes in past lives. We created the karma now to have a human body, a clear mind, having met the Dharma with spiritual teachers and patrons and friends to support us. But that this life is impermanent. We're as though falling through time toward our eventual death with every second, like being in a free-falling elevator, not knowing when it's going to hit the bottom. So to instigate some enthusiasm, some zeal, recognizing that we have to take advantage of this time that we have left. In particular, this morning, investigating the Buddhist teachings about the mind itself, so that we can observe these states and also read other literature about the mind, seeing the context of them. The reason we want to do that is to, especially out of a sense of empathy and compassion for all living beings, even our enemies, especially our enemies, those that we find irritating, that we might otherwise like to dismiss. They are exactly the same as us in wanting to be happy, be free of suffering. They have the same Buddha nature. They have the ability, the right to achieve happiness, Dharma happiness. And as they've been depthlessly kind to us in past lives, although at the moment we may not recognize their connection, they've been our mother numberless times. They've been our best friends, our patrons, our assistants. I think in order to repay their kindness, I should lead them in Dharma happiness, toward Dharma happiness. To do so perfectly and all levels of beings. There are some beings now that are higher spiritual levels than ourselves. To be able to lead them and all sentient beings, we have to achieve enlightenment, a state of omniscience. With that motivation, I must achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. I think I'm going to listen to the teachings this morning, participate, question, analyze, with the ultimate aim of achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And then bring your attention back to the present. Oh, how are we doing? Any questions, observations? iPhone Dawn is there? Oh, Christine, you have a thought.
I thank you, Venerable George. I have an observation and I want to thank you. When we first started well, the previous course, and now I'm in this one, I always found myself during the meditations thinking, come on, get on. I want to hear the course. Get on with it, George. Why do you take so long?
Mhm.
And now I am like, oh, let's just stay here the whole time.
Yeah, well, that's a
I
good
don't know what
sign.
happened.
That's a good sign. Yeah, I remember sometimes at Kopan when Lama Zopa Rinpoche would give courses, there would be seemingly interminable pujas first before the first lecture, and but later, the great lamas would Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche would quote them as saying, that mere knowledge itself is just maybe like something you can tout at cocktail parties. Not that the lineage lamas talked about cocktail parties. It's just something you can feel proud about. But if your reason for accumulating that knowledge is to overcome your tendency to harm others and to be able to eventually benefit them in Dharma ways, not just benefit them with money or sage investment advice or where to buy the best car insurance or something, but things that will lead them to ultimate happiness, then then the knowledge that you accumulate will be used in a way that will benefit you and others. So that's a good observation. So anyone else have a question before we start? So we have, I mentioned maybe some of you came over. Alex is just joining us for a short time this morning. He's down in Hendersonville, I think, south of me here. So we're talking about mind and mental factors. Chitta, chaita. Chitta is sem in Tibetan. Chitta is a Sanskrit word that means mind. In this context of talking about mind and mental factors, it's referring to primary mind, which apprehends the general nature of the perceptual field without making distinctions. And within that are mental events, chaita, or mental factors. In Tibetan, sem jung. Jung means arise or emerge. So if you say sem jung, kind of gives a sense that the chaita emerge within the primary consciousness. They're together. They're not separate. They're not like the organs of the body, the mental factors that are all demarcated. My liver is here, my kidneys here, my heart is here. They permeate the entire consciousness. These abilities to know particularities of the perceptual field. So we talked in previous weeks about the 5 ever-present, omnipresent mental factors, ever-present, omnipresent. Alex, do you know what have you heard of the 5 omnipresent mental factors? Do you know what they are?
I have to remember. It's been a while since I went over them, but douche.
Yeah. Douche.
Yes,
What discrimination?
yeah. Sorrow, feeling.
Sorrow, feeling.
Simpa. Intention. Simpa. Intention. Intention.
Semba. Yeah.
Simpa. What are the other 2?
He took the course I gave in Land of Medicine Buddha. It's been a while. Huh?
Yeah.
So also attention and contact.
Oh, that's
Intention, attention, feeling, discrimination, and contact. And then those are present in all functioning mental events. When you're going to sleep or when you're waking up or inebriated or something like that, they may not all be present, in which case the consciousness isn't functioning optimally. Then there are the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. Bob, you know the 5 object ascertaining mental factors?
Yeah. Aspiration, belief, mindfulness, I think concentration and wisdom.
Good. And now we're talking, the way the book is laid out, we're talking about the 11 virtuous mental factors. Some texts, they may immediately go, or some presentations, they may immediately go to the negative, to the klesha, the delusions or afflictions, after talking about the first two sets of fire. But here we're talking about the 11 virtuous mental factors. And who's got their memory cap on today? Has anyone memorized the 11? Rowena, have you memorized the 11 virtuous mental factors? I'm not sure if you're not responding. Maybe you're.
No, I have not memorized them properly.
Okay. How about you, Louis? Do you know the 11? So how can we go? So first one we talked about is faith. Then there's a pair, shame and embarrassment, right? Then I like to term them the 3 roots of virtue. Detachment or non-attachment, as the book puts it, non-hatred or the opposition of hatred, and non-bewilderment, or as I think the text just calls it, non-ignorance, although it's not exactly the word ignorance. So it's easy to remember. So faith, these 2, shame and embarrassment, 3 roots of virtue, make it up to 6. Then enthusiastic perseverance, joy, zeal, whatever you want to call it, effort. Pliancy, which is the end. This is a particular mental factor we'll be discussing in more detail that has the ability for the mind to feel no laziness at all. It's the ultimate antidote to both physical and mental laziness. But here, the mental factor is just referring to pliancy as a mental factor, not the physical pliancy, which is a tactile object. What else comes? Conscientiousness, carefulness, as his whole chapter in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, how important that is. Somewhat aligned to shame and embarrassment in that it's watching the mind and avoiding non-virtue. What am I missing? Oh yeah, equanimity. Equanimity is a particular mental factor, again, we'll be discussing in more detail, that is able to let go when you're trying to develop tranquil abiding, for instance. You've been watching very carefully. Part of your mind is bifurcated in watching whether the obstacles are arising. And at a certain point, when you don't have to exert that effort, you can let go of that, invest that mental energy just into the concentration. And that state of mind is called equanimity. That's a mental factor, as opposed to equanimity between sentient beings or oneself and others and so forth. And then the final one, Alda, you know the last of the 11?
No.
Aida. My name is
Aida, not Alda. Okay.
Non-harmfulness, non-cruelty.
Yes, thank you. Ahimsa, and it's famous. Gandhi used that, and Martin Luther King, who said non-violence, non-violent protests and so forth. So this is a mental factor. Okay, so we've talked about shame, we talked about faith, we talked about lucid faith or clarifying faith, the faith of conviction, which has come about now from analyzing things and becoming convinced that something is true. It doesn't mean you've realized it, because it is faith. And wishing faith. Wishing faith, I think Stephen was asking about in the beginning, wishing faith that is aspiring to achieve, say, tranquil abiding or bodhicitta, or to become a better person, having an understanding or belief that they are attainable, that I myself can attain them. So we went over that in detail. Then we talked about the next two, this pair here called shame and embarrassment, ngotsa sheba and telyoba. So, as the text says, what is shame? It is the avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself. It has the function of acting as a support for effective restraint from misconduct. So if you consider your own self, so benefit or deficits for your actions, if you do something, I will say, if I do some negative action, I will accumulate negative karma, and therefore I'll suffer in the future. So I'm not going to do that. That would be an example of shame. Or even if it's involving other people, you say, it would be shameful for me to walk around naked in downtown Santa Fe. What just happened in Santa Fe? There was some big newsworthy story. There was some
movie set where Alec Baldwin shot somebody.
Yeah.
Believe me, I can't. I wish it would go away. I mean, it's like it's like nonstop here now.
Right.
But anyway,
it's embarrassing. No,
Nice.
the mental factor embarrassment has to do with others. So these two are quite aligned. They're states of mind that shame is taking primacy of the effect on oneself, and embarrassment is is in regard to the effect on others of one's behavior. Say, for instance, the monastics are enjoined not to engage in frivolous activities before others because the laity may lose respect. So they need a special sense of embarrassment or consideration for others. We could call them consideration for self and consideration for others, or as the text has here, shame and embarrassment. Then we begin to talk about the three roots of virtue. Here the text says non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance. So a little bit, I communicated with Ziji again about this. Here in the text, it says non-attachment. From the Abhidharma Samuccaya, it says, what is non-attachment? It is the lack of attachment to existence, as she puts in parentheses here, cyclic existence, and the articles therein, the things that you use, that you enjoy. It has the function of acting as a support for non-engagement in misconduct. So if one goes back and looks at the text, I mentioned to you before that this is it usually in the Tibetan tradition, this is understood to be not just the lack of attachment, although it looks like that from the definition. So we'll talk about the words there in a second. The word, it seems to say lack of attachment. But the negative particles in Tibetan, ma, which ma chakpa is what we have here. Ma is a negative particle, means it not being attachment. Just sounds like anything else. Would anger be machakpa? Why not, Alex? It's not attachment.
But it's not opposing attachment.
Yeah, but just from the words here, this is why we're going over the definition. It seems like you might have a doubt. How about feeling? Other kinds of things. Those are not attachment. So the two negative particles in question here are the negative particle ma, like when we say mayinpa, it is not, and me means does not exist. Both of them, in different contexts, they may be translated in different ways. So, like for instance, when we talk about non-hatred here, it's shedang mepa. It sounds like there's no anger in the mind. Those are not virtuous states of mind. Right now, hopefully, none of you have anger in your mind right now. Maybe Christine was a little bit angry that the meditation went too long or something in earlier days. But at that point, that was not, right now, we have no anger in the mind, but that's not a virtuous state. So really, the intent is that, as is mentioned in the Mahavibhasha. Do you remember from our tenets course? What's the Mahavibhasha? Rowena, do you remember?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Stephen,
just-
do you remember?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
Bob knows. He's read all.
Isn't that the Sautrantika big book of Abhidharma?
Right. It's actually the tenets of the Vaibhashika
Okay.
that Vasubandhu used in writing the Abhidharma Kosha. He wrote the Abhidharma Kosha from the Sautrantika point of view, right? So he would put little digs in at various points. They say, so the Vaibhashika say. So the Mahavaibhasha was a great text that was, if it was translated into Tibetan, it doesn't exist in Tibetan now. It's been lost. There were a couple of translations into Chinese, but in that text, it mentions that these negative particles, ma and me, have different meanings. One could be that it's something other, like the example that hatred would be machakpa because it's not attachment, or it can mean the absence, the fact that attachment is not present. Was something different than attachment, or something when attachment is not present. That's what it sounds like verbally, but the main import in this case is that ma and me mean that which opposes. So instead of saying non-attachment, I like to go with the translation from Geshe Rapton's book that Stephen and mainly Stephen settled on, detachment, because in English, the preface de, not di, de, indicates opposite, or opposing. So detachment gives a better flavor of that. It's actually the antidote to that. So in the definition you have there, non-attachment, it is the lack of attachment. So you could say it is the detachment from cyclic existence and the articles of existence. It's just the way that the Tibetan is written. One can interpret it that way, or if one knows the actual meaning that's intended here, you could just leave off the saying lack of and recognize that it's talking about an antidote to attachment. What is the antidote? What is the antidote to attachment? Dawn, do you know? Are you there? Are you saving your bandwidth? iPhone, Dawn? Okay, maybe not.
I'm here, George. I'm here.
Oh,
So the antidote to attachment, I guess what's coming to mind is like spaciousness, or spaciousness. Is that?
so say you have attachment to chocolate.
Yes.
Just what, meditating on spaciousness is an antidote to that?
Meditating on maybe the illusion of the chocolate. Is
Okay.
that too foo-foo?
Too foo-foo. Foo-foo, but not too foo-foo. So here, what one has to do is provide the mind with some logical reasons to overcome attachment. So we haven't talked about attachment yet. Attachment comes in the klesha. So what is attachment? Attachment basically is a state of mind which, having experienced something pleasurable, say attractive, which gives rise to pleasure within the body and mind, and as one experiences that, because of a lack of watching the mind properly, one engages in what is called inappropriate attention. That means, oh, wow, this chocolate is good. This is the best chocolate I've ever had. If I had this, I'd always be happy. Something like that. Or, that guy is so smart, so handsome. If we were together, so forth and so on. That's called inappropriate attention. So what one needs to do is to, and of course, that inappropriate attention then causes the mind to grasp onto the object, want to keep it if it has it, wants to get it if it hasn't gotten it. That's what's called attachment from the Buddhist point of view here. So non-attachment would be breaking up that cycle in some way, recognizing that it's not, the chocolate, let's say, is not real pleasure. The experience of chocolate is not real pleasure. That understanding the what's called changeable suffering is just reducing one suffering, the thirst for chocolates, or the desire for chocolate, replacing it with another suffering, the overdose of chocolate, ODing on chocolate. When you reach that point, you no longer want to eat more chocolate. You no longer, at that moment, the attachment for taking the chocolate might be gone, although you might like to keep a reservoir of chocolate for the future, right? Your stash or whatever, right? So you can think of that. You can think of the fact that this pleasure that you're experiencing now is impermanent. When we talk about that, it's actually the nature of suffering, and so forth. So those are antidotes. Those would fall under non-attachment. It is detachment to cyclic existence. I'm changing the words here rather than saying lack of attachment. As I've mentioned, that phrase has got the negative particle ma in it, or may, and so we can translate it as d, in this case d, or opposite. It is the opposite of attachment or detachment to cyclic existence in the articles of cyclic existence. It has the function of acting as a support for non-engagement in misconduct. Make sense?
Thank you, Venerable George. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So, just as has been, this is a sort of way of writing in Sanskrit and Tibetan, as has been said above. Now, this is kind of commentary, because the previous was quotation from Abhidharma Samachaya. It is a knower which is detached, which is disenchantment and lacks attachment. Or again, rather than saying lacks attachment, is detachment. It is disenchanted and detached. So that's a virtuous state of mind. Simply not having attachment at any one moment. The fact that it's subdued, it's in the form of an imprint in your mind to rise again later, that doesn't create virtuous karma. But if you have need to develop this mental factor because you're tempted by someone has left a pile of money on the table next to you for the waitress, and you look and you think, oh, I could take that. But you apply the antidote to that, one of which would be shame, right? I shouldn't do that because I'll create negative karma. Here, also understanding that the money as a antidote to the attachment to that money would be recognizing that it wouldn't bring you real pleasure and so forth, even spending it and so forth, all these various antidotes. That would be a positive state of mind. And as I mentioned, in regard to the vows, pratimoksha vows of a layperson or a monastic, having made a determination not to engage in gross forms of attachment, let's say sexual misconduct or stealing, or gross forms of hatred and so forth, killing and so forth, having made a vow to do that, even if it's not presently manifest in one's mind, the antidote to those, even though it's not presently manifest, having made a vow before the Buddha, you create what's called a non-revelatory form. Remember when we talked about tenets? Some kind of physical thing that beings that are of a higher spiritual status than us can actually perceive in our presence. That form can prevent, even though the mental state has not arisen, the detachment or non-hatred and so forth, it can prevent those actions because you've made a very strong imprint in the mind like that, and that's resulted in some kind of physical form. Right? Are we okay? Then non-hatred, shedang meba. So again, the mepa, instead of saying non-hatred, what did Ziji, she wrote, in my pointing these out to her, the translator of this text, she said she noticed in Art Engel's things, he called these avoidance, the first one detachment, then avoidance of hatred. So maybe that would be a good one, avoidance of hatred or anti-hatred. Anti-hatred, anti is a prefix that means opposite, right? You say opposite of hatred, anti-hatred, avoidance of hatred. So the Abhidharma Samachaya says, what is non-hatred? What is the avoidance of hatred? It is the, let's say, the antidote, because here the word lack has the sense of antidote, as is mentioned in the scriptures. It is the antidote of malice with regard to sentient beings, suffering, and the sources of suffering. Do you get angry at suffering? Louis, do you get angry at suffering when you're suffering? Is it possible? It says it's the lack of malice with regard to sentient beings, suffering, and the sources of suffering.
I find that totally confusing. No, I don't get mad at suffering.
Yeah. So if you have a toothache, you don't say, damn, excuse my.
Not really. It's like, okay.
Oh, you're
with it.
You're better than I. This week I've had leaky plumbing, constipation, and a urinary infection. So I the various sufferings, I hate this.
I've always found that getting mad at it only makes it worse.
Right. Okay. Well, you've been a long time practitioner. So, and the sources of suffering would be, the thorns or bees or, the stone that has hit you or whatever, the hailstones that have hit you, you can get, you can feel hatred toward them.
Now, I can understand that, feeling hatred for the source of your suffering, but for the suffering itself.
Ah, okay.
I just couldn't.
Yeah, so
associate with that.
Open up your mind to the expanse of those disciples that you will eventually tame, and recognize that some of them may actually hate the suffering itself. So let me ask a question. What's the difference between hatred and anger? Because in the root delusions, which we have not come to yet, the word hatred is not one. The hatred is not one of the root delusions. It is called anger. Shankar, what's the difference between hatred and anger?
Well, I'm not sure the technical definition, but I would say hatred is pointed outward, right? So
Yeah.
so it's hatred towards something or a person.
Yeah, anger is not angry at someone or something. Pointed out. You're making that distinction as though that was the differentiation between the hatred.
Yeah, you're right. Well, hatred has malice in it, doesn't it? I mean, anger is really just, being upset about something or some situation or someone, right? It doesn't have necessarily the propulsion to do something about it, but hatred has that seed behind it.
Yeah, I agree with you. So here it says it is the non-hatred is a lack of malice. So implying that hatred is a malicious state of mind that wants to, hold something. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said at various times. Did I mention this last week? The Dalai Lama has said, I sometimes get angry, but I never have hatred. So that's, an implication that, sometimes the mind could be upset by something and you get a little bit perturbed, because that's the kind of one of the defining characteristics of the afflictions, the klesha, the delusions, right? That they cause the mind to become uncalm, unclear, like stirring up the riverbed after the king's cavalry have ridden their horses through the riverbed. Now the water is agitated, so it's not calm. The clarity of the water is gone because the mud has come up. So that means because of the presence of the afflictions, other delusions are present, wrong ways of thinking that cloud the mind. So what is non-hatred? What is the what did we say? The opposer of hatred? It is the antidote of malice with regard to sentient beings, suffering, and the sources of suffering. It has the function of acting as a support for non-engagement in misconduct. So if that can be present, if you can generate in your mind the antidote or the opposite of hatred, that can prevent you from engaging in negative actions, misconduct here, from killing, stealing, and so forth. Well, hatred usually has to do with some kind of thing where you're going to harm others. Well, if your intention is to steal money from others because you want them to suffer, that would be, so hatred could be a cause for stealing also, although many times stealing, the main cause is attachment. How are we doing? As has been said above. Oh, Rowena.
Okay, I see it as against hatred, you use equanimity. In other words, a non-judgmental mind. Does that have anything to do with it?
Yeah. So to expand a little bit more, what do you
Well, hatred.
say if you feel hatred for some politician? I won't mention any names. How does equanimity, how would that help?
Because I see some of those people, and if you can think of a few in particular, as just so sad. There's something they don't know about life that could make them behave better.
Okay, so that's not so much equanimity as well, in a sense, it's equanimity related, but it's some kind of wisdom and yeah.
But the feeling is one of equanimity, because I just don't, it's so easy to overindulge when somebody does something that you think is awful or ridiculous, and it's just stopping that. It's just keeping an even feeling.
Right.
So that I don't, because I can get supercharged. It's very annoying.
So, okay, good. So there could be various rationales that you use to develop this state of mind, this mental factor, this chaita, this semjong. But once it's present, it is restraining you from engaging in hatred.
Yeah.
So there could be various rationales that you use, logical reasonings that you use, but the particular state of mind is one that's restraining you from engaging in misconduct as a result of hatred. Make sense?
Thank you. Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah. So as has been said above, it is a knower that conquers generation of hatred with the observation of any of the three objects that generate hatred, sentient beings, suffering, and sources of suffering, and is, instead of saying lack of malice, you could say it is the antidote to malice. Louis.
I was just curious. The patience is, I know patience and just stopping is an antidote for becoming angry. Could that be also applied to hatred, or is it yet? If you're at hatred, is it already too late?
If you're already what
At hatred, is it too late to be patient?
No, you can generate patience, because we say if someone's getting angry or exhibiting hatred, you can say, "Hey, just patience." One has to apply that. It's good if you could prevent the hatred or the anger from rising, but that could be, that could be antidote. One of the, let's see here, what do we say? Yeah, so among the 11 virtuous mental factors, patience is not mentioned. It's one of the virtuous activities of the bodhisattvas. It's one of the perfections and so forth. So it would involve, depending on what you're experiencing, it would involve shame and embarrassment, conscientiousness, and one of these roots of virtue, right?
Okay.
Detachment, the opposite of hatred, and so forth. So here it's kind of explicit when you don't use the word lack of, like at the very end of that little sentence, and the lack of malice. There we have to understand it as meaning that the Tibetan doesn't mean just the absence or lack of malice, it means the opposite of malice. But you can see that in the first part of the sentence, you can understand why that's a valid thing to say, that it's the opposite of malice, because it's a knower that conquers generation of hatred. So it's not just the lack, as the Tibetan might be translated. A lot of people have translated it that way, or the absence of. It's the actual opposite, because it conquers the generation of hatred. Okay. Good morning, Nadine. We missed you.
Good morning, Venerable George. I forgot that the time was changed, and
your time is
yes,
changed?
yes, last weekend. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, ours changes tonight, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
What is it? Autumn. So what is it? Spring forward, fall back, right? So we have to go back an hour tonight. Thanks for that's reminding us, Nadine. Thank you for that. So now, third one. Here it says Timug Mepa in Tibetan in the text. You can see the Tibetan. I think it's in Sanskrit, it's lobya. It is not, or alobya. Amoha, sorry. Timug in Sanskrit is moha, which is not exactly what we generally mean by ignorance. In the three afflicted states of mind, ignorance, attachment, and anger, when we talk about the delusions, the kleshas, ignorance has generally a specific meaning. Although it can have a general sense of not knowing something, generally it means wrongly apprehending something. Like, for instance, grasping at a self of persons is an example of ignorance, right? Grasping at the self of phenomena is an example of ignorance. It's not just simply not knowing something. It's actively engaging. It's sometimes called wrongly. It's a type of wisdom. It's a wrongly oriented wisdom. It's apprehending in the wrong way. So here, timug or moha is not the same as anger. In Tibetan, we say khandro. It's something a little broader, having to do with sort of, one might call it bewilderment. Some people have even translated moha as delusion, although we often use the word delusion to refer to the whole panoply of deluded states of mind. So what is the opposite of ignorance, or the antidote of ignorance? I'm not using the word non-ignorance here. Regarding the opposite or anti-ignorance, the Abhidhamma Samachaya says, what is it? What is the opposite? It is knowledge arisen from fruition, scripture, contemplation, or realization. So it's a wisdom. That already implies it's not simply the lack of ignorance, right? It is a wisdom arisen from maturation, another way of saying fruition, scripture, contemplation, or realization, and is a wisdom of individual investigation. It's kind of wisdom. It has the function of acting as a support for the non-engagement in misconduct. Everyone understand the words? Donnie, are you there? Oh, Christine, what do you think? You have your hand up.
I'm here. I'm not feeling well today, but I'm listening.
Okay, let me ask you then. So did the words make sense? Here, where the text says non-ignorance, I'm translating as maybe you could say anti-ignorance or opposite or antidote to ignorance. It is a knowledge arisen from fruition, scripture, contemplation, or realization, and is a wisdom of individual investigation. It has the function of acting as a support for non-engagement and misconduct. You understand all the words there?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as the Dakini told Naropa, you understand the words. I'm happy. Now, do you understand the meaning?
I think so.
You know the story I'm talking about, that when Naropa was looking for his guru, he was a great pundit, and many years he was trying to find his real guru. He went around the stupa at Bodh Gaya, and the statues were telling him to find his guru and so forth. So he met this old lady, kind of in the scriptures they say crone. There must be some derogatory term for old guy who's a real pain in the butt also, but crone, So this lady, she said, "Do you understand the teachings?" And he said, "Yes." Do you understand the words of the teachings? He said, "Yes." And then she said, "Do you understand?" And she laughed and she applauded. And then she said, "Do you understand the meaning?" And he said, "Yes, of course. I'm a great pundit," And she started crying and pulling her hair and screaming and so forth, implying that she didn't think he understood the deep meaning. So I'm just joking with you here. So
It's funny, actually, I am laughing. Yeah.
Okay, so knowledge arisen from fruition, scripture, contemplation, or realization. What is that referring to, do you think? Do you
Teaching.
think it? Donnie? Okay, we lost her. So we can have a kind of opposite of ignorance. In other words, it's a kind of wisdom, right? That has arisen because of karma that we've created in the past. We've engaged in the study of wisdom. We've analyzed things. And so at birth, we can have an innate kind of wisdom. You know, given a different example, say, if you've engaged in hatred and malice in previous lives, sometimes as a child, upon birth, without even being taught anything, you can have a kind of malicious kind of nature, like the kids that are happy to strike the ants or the bugs on the sidewalk with stones, or, you know, they feel no hesitancy to do that. So when we talk about this antidote to ignorance, which is a kind of wisdom, there is one type that arises because of maturation from karma that we created in the past. Here it says fruition, right? It means that the maturing of karma can arise from scripture. What does that mean? What do you think? Alex, do you have any idea what that means?
Through like reading, learning.
Reading and hearing, although, you know, sometimes when we talk about hearing, it seems to exclude reading, and sometimes when we talk about scripture, it sounds like reading as opposed to hearing, but it includes both. So this would be the wisdom arisen from hearing. Contemplation or realization. Contemplation refers to wisdom arisen from meditation. So first of all, you hear something or you read something, you get a general idea, kind of wisdom. When you contemplate that more, there's a deeper type of wisdom that arises from contemplation that exceeds the utility of the wisdom arisen from hearing. You understand it from various points of view. Like, for instance, when they debate in the courtyard, the Tibetan monks, that's a kind of contemplation, because you're listening to someone's questioning you about some subject from a different angle that you're used to thinking about. So it's a kind of contemplation. So that's a deeper kind of wisdom. And that it also includes, what do we say? We say the wisdom arisen from hearing, the wisdom arisen from contemplation, and the wisdom arisen from meditation. So contemplation is a general kind of meditation, but in the end, once you come to a conclusion, you've determined through your analysis that death is inevitable, death is certain, death is definite, then you let go of the analysis and just hold that single-pointedly. That's called the wisdom arisen from meditation. Or, well, let's say what arises from that is what's called the wisdom arisen from meditation. Then it also adds one here, or realization. What does that mean? Well, you don't have to depend on the ripening of past karma anymore, or reading or hearing scripture, or contemplating and analyzing, you know, or meditating. You've realized it, so it's present in your mind. Okay, so it is knowledge arisen from fruition, scripture, contemplation, or realization, and is a wisdom of individual investigation. So it's an active state of mind. It's not simply the lack of ignorance. It is a wisdom that has the ability to investigate things individually. That term, individual investigation, when we talk about the 5 Buddha families, you've heard of the 5 Buddha families? There's, they're related with different types of wisdom. And one of the wisdoms is called wisdom of individual analysis, or here, individual investigation. It has the function of acting as a support for the non-engagement in misconduct. So as has been said above, it is a wisdom of individual investigation that is able to serve as an antidote to ignorance. There, very clear. It's the antidote to ignorance. Arising from its cause, being either acquired through birth or arisen through application. So through birth would be the one from fruition, right? Application means you've applied yourself to hearing the scriptures, contemplating them, and realizing them. Those would all be examples of application. Make sense? Oh, there's Donnie. Yeah. Hope you're feeling better. Okay, so now there's a discussion of these 3. So I like to call these the 3 roots of virtue. Not say detachment, if you will, opposite of hatred, opposite of ignorance, or they say the antidote of hatred and antidote of ignorance. These 3 mental factors are like the root of all virtuous qualities, the method for ceasing all misconduct, and the essence of all the paths. So these are definitely things that we have to try to generate in our mind. Of course, we need, simply, if you don't have any other qualities, having faith, lucid faith, allows the mind to be calm and create virtuous karma and so forth. Of the other 2 types of faith also creating virtuous karma, the shame and embarrassment prevents you from engaging, actively prevents you from engaging in misconduct, so it creates virtuous karma. So now these 3 roots of virtue are active states of mind. They're not just the lack of something. All paths and stages, we say salam is a typical combination in Buddhism. Sa means stages or grounds. Lam means paths. All paths and stages are for the sake of abandoning the 3 poisons. So what are the 3 poisons? Nadine, do you know what the 3 poisons are?
Yes, ignorance, anger, and desire.
Yeah, attachment. Yeah, usually
The attachment.
You could call it a desire also, but desire. You could desire to achieve enlightenment, and that's not one of the 3 poisons. Poisonous minds of the afflictions, the first 3 are what are called the 3 poisons. So all paths and stages are for the sake, they are engaged in for the sake of abandoning the 3 poisons as well as their imprints. Abandoning the 3 poisons. So if you abandon attachment, what does that mean? What does that mean if you abandon attachment? Ida, do you have a thought? How about Stephen? What does it mean to abandon attachment?
Well, to me anyways, Venerable George, it feels like, you've generated the opposite mind, which is to be detached. And I guess it can look at like 3 different levels, just like the elements of cyclic existence itself, or even become detached from attaining nirvana.
Right. So if you have detachment, which is an antidote to attachment, have you abandoned attachment?
Well, no, I would say no,
Here it says abandon.
you still have
All paths and stages are engaged in for the sake of abandoning the 3 poisons as well as their imprints.
Yeah. I would think you would still have the imprints. I mean, it might
Well,
not
you
be in your
still,
mind.
even if you temporarily have detachment, because it may not be permanent in your mind, it's a mental factor. That's acting as an antidote, as a prevention from generating attachment. When you go to sleep and you wake up and the present is not the active state of detachment, you can get attached again. You can have attachment again, can manifest. So we talk about two different things. We talk about the seeds of the delusions or the afflictions. In Tibetan, we say sabon. The seeds of the delusions are always there. When you meet the right conditions, like say seeing an attractive object, hearing someone praising you or something like that, as a result of experiencing pleasure, that attachment, that state of mind that exaggerates the qualities of that can rise, and you can have full-blown attachment. So it can be either manifest or in the form of a seed. But then even when you've abandoned the seeds of the delusions, like the seeds of attachment, maybe Alex knows this, he's been studying some of these things. So if you've abandoned the seeds on the path of seeing, is there any residue of that left?
The imprints?
Yeah, that's what we're referring here to, imprints. So the imprints of the delusions are not eradicated on the hearers or solitary realizers path. They achieve their nirvana, but they still have imprints of the delusions in their consciousness that prevent them from seeing the two truths simultaneously, that prevent them from generating bodhicitta. So the imprints are not, on the bodhisattva path, the imprints of the delusions are not eradicated until the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis. They're beginning to be eradicated there, according to the Prasangika. Oops, one of my fellow residents up here, wasp has just come up on my chest. Oh, yeah, there you go. I usually put them in a clear plastic thing next to the statues of the Buddhas and so forth, so they can see them. So the imprints. So it's saying here, all the paths and stages are implied. Here's the word, engaged for the sake of abandoning the three poisons. So that would mean when you achieve nirvana, you have abandoned the three poisons. That means the seeds are like, what's the word? What a seed doesn't bring, what can't bring any effect? Infertile, or there's some other word. So
Barren.
Barren, yeah, the seeds are barren. So, but their very presence is kind of an indication that there are imprints in the mind of them that prevent realization, further realization. And those are called the obstructions to omniscience, right? We talk about two kinds of obstructions to liberation and obstructions to omniscience or all-knowing. Hence, the function is specified as, quote, acting as a support for effective restraint from misconduct. And it was at this point that CG put the notes. You would have thought, because all of the previous ones all said non-engagement, you would have expected, she was expecting as a translator, this one would say non-engagement, but here it says restraint, which indicates more clearly that it is a state of mind which is actively restraining you from doing something, not simply the lack of hatred or the lack of attachment or the lack of ignorance. Furthermore, regarding non-attachment, non-attachment to this life, non-attachment to one's mind, having turned away from this life to seek the purpose of future lives, is the attitude of the being of small scope. Okay, so when we talk about non-attachment, it's not just one kind of thing. When we talk about the beings of the three kinds of beings, it's translated here, scope. What's the characteristic of a person, Shankar, of the initial, intermediate, and high scopes?
Sorry, would you repeat the question again, please, Venerable?
Yes. What is the defining characteristic in this context of a person of initial scope, intermediate scope, and highest scope in terms of non-attachment? What are they not attached to?
Oh, I see. Yeah. So, well, initial scope, they're not attached to the current life, or they're thinking of future lives.
Right. Those two go hand in hand. So not attached to the transitory appearances of this life and the pleasures and pains, thinking motivated for finding pleasure in future lives. So one is not attached to the present. So how about the intermediate being?
Yes, the intermediate one is non-attachment to, well, it's the opposite of renunciation. So it will be non-attachment of, renunciation is disgust of the pleasures of this of samsara, right? So that would be non-attachment to that, whatever that is.
So here, yeah. So that's the next one, not attachment to the marvels of cyclic existence,
right?
Having turned away from the from one's depths, the depths of one's heart. From adherence is the attitude of being of the intermediate scope. So what does that mean? Adherence. How do you adhering, strongly being attached to, the fact that you could become a king in the future, or, being generous now, I'm going to be rich in the future, and so forth and so on. You can have the person of initial scope recognizes that the present is not the end all, that there's numberless lives in the future, and working for the benefit of that. So that's the minimum that you need to be able to practice a spiritual path according to Buddhism. The person of intermediate scope is really someone who's aiming for nirvana or moksha, right? Liberation or nirvana. They are not attached to any of the pleasures of the higher realms, the God realm, the formless realm, the form realm. They are able to, and as a result of that, they can have compassion for others in a much deeper way as they have that sense of non-attachment, or the opposite of attachment, antidote of attachment. So here, detachment to the extremes of both cyclic existence and solitary peace, and seeking non-abiding nirvana is the attitude of the great scope. So again, some more words here. So what does it mean, Bob? The extremes of cyclic existence and peace, of existence and peace. What are those?
Well, it means either being attached to cyclic existence, which is one extreme, like the ordinary person, or attached to samsara. And the other one is peace, which would be someone who's liberated, but who does not go the extra distance to become a Buddha. So they become attached to the solitary peace of nirvana.
Right. So this combination of existence and peace comes in a lot of places in the Prajnaparamita and prayers that we say. When we do the Lama Chopa, there's a verse we recite 3 times, long verse about, you are the guru, you are the yidam, you are the dakas and dakinis and protectors too. You know the verse I'm talking about? From this point on until we reach the essence of enlightenment, I will seek no refuge other than you. please, what is it? Please, no, I might have Tibetan. Just before we offer the sok, right? Let's say this verse after request to the lineage gurus is called putting the stake, like putting the stake in the ground that you're going to tie your tent to. It's got to be really stuck in there deep. Kyoni Lama, Kyoni Yidam, Kyoni Kandro, Shu Kyonte. You are the guru, you are the meditational deity, the Yidam, you are the dakinis, dakas and dakinis, and the protectors. Tengne Zunte, Jangshu Bardu, Kyomin, Caption, Misoe. From now until, from this point on, until I reach enlightenment, Kyomin, Caption, Misoe. I'll search for, seek no other refuge than you. Didan Bardo, Chime Tayan, Tukche Chakyu, Sungsola. So this is kind of request. Here, now in the present, in the intermediate state, Bardo, and in the future continuum of lives, even there, hold me with your iron hooks of compassion. Recognizing that the omniscient mind is compassionate, bringing that up. And then the final verse, Sishi Jikdro, Ngurup Kunso, Tangi Drokso Bachosum. Si Shi Jikdro. Si means existence. Shi means peace. Jik means fear. Drol means liberate. Liberate me from the fears of cyclic existence and peace or nirvana. So this is related to what we're saying here. And it says, grant me all cities, all extraordinary qualities of mind. We call the cities, the ngudrup. Tengi Drokso, be my constant friend and companion. Like Lama Tsongkhapa's friend and companion was actually Manjushri. Barchosum, protect me from all obstacles. This is a very powerful verse that's said there. So, Sishi Jitro, liberate me from the fears of cyclic existence. So, who would have fears of cyclic existence? The Hinayana practitioners, the hearers and solitary realizers that are working toward nirvana. They would have a fear of cyclic existence, because being in cyclic existence, if you don't guard your mind, you can develop the delusions, you can experience also all the sufferings. What is the fear of peace? Why should that be fearful? Bob, you answered the other part of the question. What about you?
Well, it'd be because you get stuck as at a lower level, just being liberated from samsara, but you don't go all the way to full Buddhahood where you can help all sentient beings.
Yeah. So how does the Bodhisattva see that? Why would he or she see peace of ism?
Well, it's for the Bodhisattva. It means voluntarily remaining in samsara to develop the additional merit and to clear up the additional very faint obscurations to achieve full Buddhahood, so that he can fully benefit all sentient beings.
Right. So you're repeating that again, but what's the fear of peace? Why should that be fearful?
Well, the fear of it is it might seem too attractive. You might get stuck there.
Yeah, it's just like a monastic avoiding hanging out at the discotheque for fear of attachment rising, or that others might offer you a drink and unthinkingly you take a drink. So fear of peace, it doesn't mean that the Buddha doesn't have peaceful mind, that's something fearful. It's referring to the state of nirvana where, or even meditative equipoise on emptiness. In that state, one has achieved peace, because if you have a direct realization of emptiness, at that time, the the delusions, even if you haven't reached nirvana yet, even just having direct realization of emptiness, the delusions not only are non-manifest, but they're not present and they're not manifest. And that peaceful state of mind might be one that one might like to remain in for a long period of time. That's also one of the facets of fears of peace. So the Buddhas sometimes awaken the bodhisattvas when they're meditating on emptiness and say, enough, get on with it. You help sentient beings create virtuous karma, make offerings to the Buddhas and bodhisattvas, and continue your progress to enlightenment. Don't just remain in this peaceful state. So that's kind of the sense of the fear of cyclic existence and solitary peace. So detachment to the extremes of both existence and peace, and seeking non-abiding nirvana is the attitude of the being of great scope. So it's not simply not being attached to existence or peace, to not being attached to samsara or nirvana, but also seeking what's called non-abiding nirvana. So here, non-abiding nirvana is not like just the Hinayana nirvana. Non-abiding nirvana means a state of omniscience. Okay, you're not abiding in cyclic existence. When it says non-abiding, you're not abiding in cyclic existence or in solitary peace. Solitary peace meaning nirvana for oneself. Non-abiding in either of those places. Explained in this manner, it follows that all the scriptures will need to be explained here. How could I possibly do that? This is Kanchen Yeshe Yeltsin say. Hey, here, I merely indicate the door to the intelligent ones. Likewise, the same applies also to non-hatred and non-ignorance. Or let's say the opposites of hatred and ignorance. Here, the opposite of ignorance is a wisdom of individual investigation and is of two types. Non-ignorance acquired, or say, opposite of ignorance is kind of wisdom acquired through birth, and the antidote of ignorance arisen through application. So we talked about that before. Innate wisdom that someone has, and the various ways that you acquire it through application, meaning wisdom arisen from hearing, which is a non-ignorance, wisdom arisen from contemplation, wisdom arisen from meditation. Okay. Are we all together here? Everyone okay? I can see why Donnie was embarrassed as she has to lie down. No, it's okay. No. Do. I felt that way yesterday. I had all day. So from among these two, say anti-ignorance, the opposite of ignorance, acquired through birth, is indicated as arisen from fruition in the above citation, because it is arisen, it arises from the fruition, the maturation of past actions without depending on the circumstances of this life. So when we talk about, in popular culture, we talk about nurture, raising young children, is it nurture or nature? What is that? How is that related to this? Rowena, do you know that expression, nurture and nature? Is the children's development depending on how they're nurtured in school and the community, or is it just their nature that they're going to be bad or good or whatever?
The teachers always argue about that. You get somebody in a bad morning and it's their nature. If you get somebody afternoon after a second cup of coffee, they say well, we need to do this. It would work out better,
Yeah. So here, Buddhism would say it's both. So nature is let's say if you talk about wisdom, good qualities, it is that which you have acquired through the maturation of karma. So it's as you take birth, you have the karma to be more intelligent, or to be not to engage in malice and so forth. And application would mean all the other things, reading, writing, and arithmetic, reading, hearing, thinking about it, and from a Buddhist perspective, going beyond that, meditating on that, single-pointedly. So the opposite of ignorance arisen through application refers to the three: the wisdom arisen from hearing, the wisdom arisen from contemplation, and the wisdom arisen from meditation. The basis upon which one engages in hearing, listening, or reading. When it says hearing can be both, right? With the wisdom arisen from hearing, the basis upon which one engages in hearing, with the wisdom arisen from hearing, is the conqueror's scriptures, as well as their commentaries. The teacher's scriptures have 12 divisions. So this is the, I don't know if there's a bigger division. This is, the 12. Sometimes those can be compressed to, maybe it says 9. Does it mention here? Yeah, 9 branches. And those can even be compressed into 3. The Vinaya, the Sutras, and the Abhidharma Pitakas, the baskets of those. So here, this is the sort of like extensive explanation. Set of discourses, set of melodious descriptions, the set of prophecies, set of verses, set of purposeful expressions. What's an example of that? Do you know what that's referring to? Anyone? Shankar, do you know the purposeful expressions? What's the famous little book in the Hinayana, in the Theravada tradition? It's sort of like just one-liners or two-liners from the Buddha, you might say.
Oh, I can't remember the name now.
Yeah, I can't either. This is not coming in my mind. I'm older than you, though. Set of background accounts. So that would be like the Jatakas, the Jataka tales. Set of expressions and realizations, set of legends, set of birth. Oh, sorry, Jataka tales, a set of birth stories.
Birth stories, yeah.
Yeah. So when it says background accounts, that would be other than the stories of Buddha telling about his past lives, telling about the background of the bodhisattvas, or this, they did this because they did this in the past, and so forth. The set of the very extensive, set of marvels, set that settles. Since it would be verbose, too much talking, writing, if I were to explain in detail the identity and principal subject matter of each of them, I shall not write more here. So you can find explanations of those 12 sets in various places. Probably if you look on the web, the Acharya Chandrakirti, who wrote the Majjhimaka Vatara and the Prasanapada, one of the, the Tibetans consider, Lama Tsongkhapa is considered to be, the perfect expositor of emptiness and so forth.
Venerable, the short expression, was that the Dhammapada? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, Dhammapada, yeah. A purposeful expressions, yeah, Dharmapada. So Gareth Sparham translated the Tibetan version of that. So he called it the Tibetan Dharmapada, which is more aligned with some of the verses interpretation from the Mahayana point of view, if you ever want to check that. So Chandrakirti, Acharya Chandrakirti, taught that these 12 branches of scripture can be subsumed into 9 branches by taking the 4 main background accounts and associates in the listing above as one. And in that case, you get 9. The 12 are condensed into 9. The 9 divisions can in turn be condensed into the basket of discourses. So we say the Sutra Pitaka. Pitaka is a Sanskrit word that means basket, as though you collect the fruits and you put them into various baskets. You put the plums here and you put the peaches there and the apples in different baskets. The basket of discourses, or Sutra Pitaka, the basket of discipline, the Vinaya Pitaka, and the basket of higher knowledge. Here it just says knowledge, Abhidharma Pitaka, the basket of Abhidharma. In the Abhidharma Kosha, it says, what's the etymology of Abhidharma? It says Abhidharma is stainless wisdom. You could say higher Dharma. So Abhi means beyond the ordinary Dharma. It's sort of this, the stainless wisdom is the subject matter of the Abhidharma. The main subject matter of these three baskets is the three trainings. Have you heard of the three trainings before, Ida? You know what the three trainings are?
Venerable, I'm barely here. I had my shot, booster shot yesterday, so I'm just here for the imprint.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not feeling too good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm here.
Okay, so here I'll give you an idea. So the three higher trainings are something exclusive to Buddhism. Generally, even the Hindu schools, non-Buddhist schools, have trainings in ethics, in concentration, and in wisdom. But the higher trainings, the word higher implies that they're joined with the renunciation of cyclic existence. So engaging in ethics as the basis, that's a training of ethics or Vinaya, training in concentration, and training in wisdom. So they build on one another. Ethics is kind of like the basis to develop concentration. I told you before that Lama Yeshe used to say, many Westerners want to develop single-pointed concentration, but they don't know the secret ingredient, which is ethics, morality, the practice of morality. Morality makes the mind calm in general. On the basis of that, you can develop concentration. Concentration alone, trying to understand emptiness and so forth, is like, not having enough illumination when you're looking at things. Like when I try to read the instructions for my pasta or something like that, I have to put on the glasses and get under the light. That's kind of like the wisdom. So the main subject of the basket of discipline is the training in ethics. That's what's talked about mainly in the Vinaya Pitaka. The main subject matter of the basket of discourses, or the Sutra Pitaka, is the training of meditative stabilization. Although the Sutra Pitaka includes information about everything, but the main subject matter is the training in, here it says meditative stabilization, so in concentration. The main subject matter of the basket of knowledge, or the Abhidharma Pitaka, is the training in wisdom. Okay, we together? Everyone okay? In addition, the Abhidharma Samachaya, the compendium of knowledge, teaches that the three trainings are equally taught in the basket of discourses. So, as I said, the Sutra Pitaka includes all of them, but emphasis on concentration. The two trainings in ethics and in meditative stabilization are taught in the basket of discipline. So in the Vinaya Pitaka, emphasis is on ethics, but as a result of that, it talks about how to develop concentration. And the training in wisdom is taught by the Abhidharma Pitaka, the basket of higher knowledge or stainless knowledge. So then he asks, what is the intention behind this? When one guards the stipulated boundaries of discipline by properly relying upon mindfulness and introspection, one will be able to effectively cease laxity and excitement through just through that mindfulness and introspection, whereupon it becomes the supreme method for generating meditative stabilization. Nowadays, forming an understanding of such stages of the path is extremely rare. So this is essentially using sophisticated words to talk about what we've already mentioned. When one guards the stipulated boundaries of discipline, that means you keep your vows, the boundaries, you don't go beyond this, you stay on this side, by properly relying upon mindfulness and introspection. So how do you keep the vows? You have to be mindful of the vows. You have to know what they are, first of all, because you can't have mindfulness if you haven't experienced something. Remember, mindfulness is a mental factor that keeps in mind something that's been previously understood. Remember when we talked about mindfulness? So you mindful of your vows means you have to know what they are. As a layperson, you have to remember what your vows are. And you have to watch the mind if it's beginning to contravene any of them, in which case you might apply shame and embarrassment to prevent you from going into those and so forth. So by doing that, by guarding your vows and by relying on mindfulness and introspection, one will be able to effectively cease laxity and excitement through just that. So as a result of watching one's vows, practicing the higher training of ethics, one has already got a foot up on developing the higher training and concentration, because you've already eliminated, because of mindfulness and introspection, you have the tools to eliminate excitement and laxity, which are the main obstacles to developing concentration. Excitement is when you go off, you're watching the clear light nature of the mind, but then you think of pizza or something in your mind kind of bifurcates onto that, or different things. And laxity is when the mind begins to get dull, loses the clarity of the object. So you have the methods by practicing ethics, the higher training of ethics, that acts as a support for the higher training of concentration. And higher training and concentration allows you to develop that sort of wisdom that realizes things. So the higher training in wisdom. Therefore, seek much hearing on the three baskets. Read a lot, hear a lot, as well as their commentaries. The basis upon which one engages in hearing, that is the three baskets, these three Pitakas and their commentaries, are the basis upon which one engages in hearing, analyze again and again the meaning of what has been heard with the four types of reasoning we talked about before, we'll talk about again, and generate an ascertaining consciousness, that sort of realizing consciousness. Put the entire path into practice by way of analytical and stabilizing meditation upon that very meaning which the wisdom arisen from contemplation has gained ascertainment of. So that's the last step. So once you've contemplated something, you've done analytical meditation, then you place your mind in stabilizing meditation upon that very meaning which has arisen from contemplation. The very meaning that the wisdom arisen from contemplation has gained ascertainment of. So you've become certain of something, then you hold your mind single-pointedly on that. These are the assertions of the great trailblazers, Nagarjuna, Asanga, and the other great beings like Dignaga and Dharmakirti and so forth, which were, blazed the trail of these things. Hence, those who are intelligent should engage in such a mode of path that pleases the conquerors. So if you have the sense of embarrassment, remember, you think, I'm not studying. What are the Buddhas? Are the conquerors, the Buddhas, happy with me? They want me to be just studying these things. Right. Take a look up there. If you discard much hearing, if you don't engage in hearing, you just, I don't have to go to lecture, I don't have to study. The excellent cause of wisdom of individual investigation. That's what the The hearing is the gist of what you're going to investigate, right? Say, if you discard much hearing, the excellent cause of wisdom of individual investigation, follow fools stupidly like sheep, just, I don't know. I hope no one here is anti-vaxxer or something like that, but, following, was it Josh Rogan? Is that one of the guys? These different, Carlson and so forth, dwell in relaxed and idle manner without contemplating anything whatsoever, yet wallow in the conceit of being good-hearted, practicing Dharma, engaging in practice and so forth, then you will waste your excellent support, it means a bodily support, mental support of a human being, with its leisures and endowments. You will ruin others who are equal in fortune to oneself, and even become a serious condition contributing to the degeneration of the teachings. Whoa, heavy, right? Therefore, those of you who wish to do yourselves good should generate belief from your hearts regarding the modes of wisdom of individual investigation as explained above. So going from ethics to concentration to higher training in wisdom based upon the scriptures and so forth that you hear or read, and then you contemplate them analytically again and again. And then when you've come to the conclusion, you hold your mind single-pointedly. In this vein, one of the texts called the verse summary of the perfection of wisdom in 8,000 verses. So it's not the 8,000 verse, but a summary of that. How can millions and millions of blind men without a guide enter the city without even knowing the path? We're like blind people now going to the city of liberation or enlightenment, or let's say even the city of bodhicitta and renunciation and wisdom. Without knowing, it's like we're blind. How can we, if we don't have a guide, how can we get there? Without wisdom, the 5 perfections are without sight. So this is a common refrain in the Prajnaparamita. The first 5 perfections are all engaged in order to develop the 6th perfection, the perfection of wisdom, which is like sight. They are engaged in because they accumulate merit, they elongate one's rebirth in the upper realms by practicing morality and charity and so forth, not creating heavy negative actions because you're patient and so forth. But their main aim is to achieve the perfection of wisdom. Without a guide, they cannot contact enlightenment. At such a time that they are strongly conjoined with wisdom, then eyes are acquired and this name is attained. Okay. The Venerable Maitreya, future Buddha, also says in his Uttara Tantra, the Sublime Continuum, conceptualizing the 3 spheres, the actor, the person who's doing the action itself, and the object of the action. Those are the 3 spheres here. Conceptualizing the 3 spheres is asserted to be a knowledge obscuration. Conceptualizations such as miserliness are asserted to be afflicted obscurations. Make sense? What do you think? Christine, what do you think? Conceptualizing the 3 spheres is asserted to be a knowledge obscuration. Is that a knowledge obscuration? Usually, if you conceptualize that the agent, the action, and the object are inherently existent, is that a knowledge obscuration? That sounds more like a diluted obscuration, isn't it? There must be something else going on here. Let's read further. Apart from wisdom, none other is a cause for abandoning these. Therefore, wisdom is supreme. Its foundation is hearing. Thus, hearing is supreme. I know you could say contemplation is supreme. Acharya Aryasura. Aryasura was one of the individuals who wrote, I think he wrote a compendium of the Jataka tales, also one of the great saints. He wrote, "The blind ones of little hearing do not know the modes of meditation. Lacking that, what are they to contemplate?" This expression I mentioned to you before in the Gelugpa, especially, they say, trying to meditate without having heard or read the scriptures, knowing about them, is like an armless person trying to climb a mountain, high mountain. You can't get anywhere. The blind ones of little hearing do not know the modes of meditation. Lacking that, what are they to contemplate? If you haven't heard the teachings, what are you going to contemplate? Therefore, you should put effort in hearing. Due to that cause, contemplate. And additionally, then, when you come to ascertainment, certainty, meditate, whereby vast wisdom will arise. So just hearing the teachings, today, Dani has created the wisdom of hearing. Maybe she's contemplated a little also. Oh, you poor girl. So then when you come to conclusion, when you get some certainty, you hold that single-pointedly. Vasubandhu, the supreme scholar, also says in the Abhidharmakosha, by abiding in ethics, possessing hearing and contemplation, there is strong application in meditation. So again, talking about these three trainings as being necessary. Such statements are made repeatedly in the scriptures as well as their commentaries. Okay, a lot of discussion about that because so important, these three roots of virtue. Any thoughts before we end? Christine.
I have a question, Venerable George. Thank you. In my mind, I get confused, or I need clarity about, asking for blessings and versus doing all of these things. And what is the different benefits? I understand the benefits that we've all been talking about here, but how do just the blessings of our guru, and don't they act as a support for these as well? Is blessings a passive thing, or what? I grew up Catholic, and so this idea of blessings, it's really confusing to me.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do
You would
it.
think that the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas would, if they were capable, would grant blessings,
Right.
even if we didn't think we needed them. So that's one thing. But when you request blessings, what you're doing is you're opening up your mind to the possibility of making realizations. So I like to give the example, if Bob and I and Shanka are on a Antarctic expedition, and I fall into a big crevice. Now, not to demean them in any way, they might wander off. I'm here, I'm calling up for help. No help is coming. I can just be stranded there for a long time with no sense of being able to get out. But if I'm requesting help, I'm calling, then I might be alert, watching whether a rope will be dropping down, in which case I'll grab it. If I'm not thinking about escaping, not anticipating some kind of outside help, if the rope comes down, I might think it's a serpent and swipe it aside and not realize it. So that's kind of like the sense of the blessings. The blessings can be coming all the time by the Buddhas. They're inspiration from the Dharmakaya itself. In fact, it says in the scriptures, it says all virtuous actions that we create are the result of blessing of the Dharmakaya. You have to think about that somewhat. So
That's
the
what's
blessings,
confusing to me.
so
when
the
they do
blessings are
that.
coming. If you are requesting them, then you will be aware. Oh, this is giving me an opportunity to practice patience. Here's my chance to practice generosity. Like Milarepa, I've told the story several times when he broke his cooking bowl, because of the blessings of thinking about impermanence and so forth all the time, and the blessings of the Buddha, he was able to see that as a joyous event rather than being disheartened that his bowl that he made his nettle soup in was broken. Okay. So thank you for your patience. We'll continue next week. I'll be on I've finished 2 weeks of radiation. I've got 7 weeks more to go, but I'm feeling okay, so we should be okay. So let's dedicate our merit. Sit comfortably. Relax your body and mind. Try to recall the clear light nature of your mind just to get rid of other extraneous thoughts. And recognize that because of our motivation at the beginning and because of the material we were investigating, the Buddhist teachings, we've created a vast store of merit this morning, which will definitely ripen in cyclic existence as something pleasurable, but it might, if we don't dedicate it, it might ripen in some way that is of no use to us or becomes contradictory to our spiritual practice. Even the merits of the past and the future we can dedicate along with the present merits to the supreme goal, which we will eventually achieve, enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Due to the merits that I've created today, may I quickly become a Buddha, enlightened being, from which state I can effortlessly and spontaneously lead all sentient beings out of suffering into that same supreme, everlasting, blissful state of enlightenment. So dedication is different than motivation. Motivation is before you've done the action. Now, dedication is a state of mind that recognizes the virtues that is created and is wishing, aspiring, mental factor aspiration, that they ripen in a particular way. And we can seal this dedication in the emptiness of the three spheres. The merits that we've created are not inherently existent. The goals that we are dedicating them to are not inherently existent. They appear, they function conventionally, but they don't exist inherently the way that they appear, as findable in their basis. And the act of dedication itself is just a process. You can't find dedication on any of the elements. It's just a name, it's just a concept that's validly applicable to the thinking of the merits, wishing that they ripen in a particular way. It said that dedication, conventional dedication first, and then dedicating in the emptiness of the three spheres, not only keeps karma, our virtuous karmic roots, from being used up, because we dedicate conventionally to enlightenment, but also prevents them from being destroyed by anger and wrong view and abandoning the Dharma and so forth. Okay, thank you very much.